So you do all this planning and measuring, detective work, get it all strapped back up, bring it in here, start measuring stuff, closing it up, and it just closes right up like butter, not a problem. It's at 14 millimeters now because the tractor said, fuck this guy, he's done all this shit for 5 days, now let's just go right together, no problem. And let him try to figure that shit out. So this time, I put it in there, did some measuring as things hit so we know where things are, and it's just going together like I could just push it on there if I wanted to, but I stopped because I still got to get my ultra gray sealant in there. So let me give you some measurements here so you'll have them. So let's see, first thing is, the second that the clutch hit the teeth, the gap in the bell housing is 45 millimeters. Oh, no, it's not. Stop. It's to clutch, it's 32 millimeters. Okay, so when it hits 32 millimeters, that's when your teeth should be hitting. Okay, and you got to get it lined up by just double checking that little tiny gear in here, the flat one to the right, not the helical one. It doesn't matter, but this one's easier. And just move it back and forth and see if it feels like it's in there. Then you can start cranking it in. So that's at 32 millimeters. And the first splines have hit the clutch. The splines are 45 millimeters long. That's 13 more millimeters than needed. So there's no way that the clutch shaft or the transmission shaft is going to run out of spline because you bought some weird clutch, unless it's got 13 millimeters of extra, sticking out in front of it, which would be a lot. So at 32 millimeters, it starts to engage. At 24 millimeters, the drive shaft, okay, the PTO shaft starts to engage. So you go 32, get the clutch in, you go in another 8 millimeters, the PTO starts hitting. That's where you want to have this cover off and reach into the front side of the PTO and just see if it feels like it's going in. The way you'll know on either one of the shafts, whether it's the clutch or the PTO, is if you try to move it and it's just stuck with absolutely no clangy play. It gotta have a little bit. It might not look like a lot, but you can hear it clang, 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 clang. If it's just not moving, you're on top of it, and it's probably not going to screw in. Your bolts are probably going to start tightening up on you. When I'm tightening these bell housing bolts, I am putting nothing on them. They're just going in like butter. Okay, no pressure at all. So 32 millimeters clutch should hit, 24 millimeters the PTO should hit. Now you have to watch here. 25 millimeters, that's your front four-wheel drive shaft. So you've got to do that before you do the PTO inside the transmission. If you're not putting that on there, which is that little coupling right there, 1 more millimeter and it'll be stuck. You'll have to pull the transmission back a tad. Now, let me warn you about something, okay? That'll really piss you off if you don't follow this closely. That little coupling, okay, if you don't wait for it to get almost up and hitting the front differential, if you see it like 10 millimeters back and go, I'll just pick it up and put it on there, you will pull the shaft out of the transmission. It'll drop, and then you'll be like, shit, now you can't put the tractor together. Now you can attempt to put the coupling back on it, put a socket extension on there and lift up on it and try and feel your way in. I've had no luck doing that. I've had to pull it back several inches to get it back in there right, okay? So after you do the clutch and engage it, and you're cranking the bell housing back, and you're going for that 24 millimeters, keep an eye on that bushing or that coupling that's coming back into the front differential. Don't let it hit and get all bound up, because it's going to be below it. You're going to have to lift it up and be real careful, okay? Get it on there a little bit, and if it feels like it's right, leave it. Don't pull it anymore. You may pull it out of the transmission, and then you got a problem. If you think it's on there, start cranking your bell housing to get to your next 1 millimeter here, and then keep an eye on the thing, or have somebody watch the thing below and make sure it's moving forward onto the differential. And before you crank it too far. Now, if you bind that up, it will stop the tractor from moving forward. And you could probably damage something if you kept cranking really hard, because you've got the transmission, the four-wheel drive transmission shaft going into the four-wheel drive unit in the front end, and now you're just crunching the two together. So watch that. let's see, 25. All right, so that's 25 millimeters. You need to engage the four-wheel drive on the front end. I think that's all the measurements. Now, this always got stuck at 20. It's at 14, and it's not tightening up at all. I mean, I'm just turning them like almost by hand, but I have to use a wrench. So I'm going to stop. I might go in a little bit more and then pull it back, but I've got to get the sealant on there. So, you know, I didn't have to do the clutch thing I talked about. It just went in this time. So who knows? You know, this time when I put the service tool in there to line the clutch up, it's got a little bit of flop on it. So I've always lifted up on it a little bit, and I've tried not to lift it up all the way. I try to get it kind of centered. And so it was probably off a billionth of an inch, up or down, creating that bind. Every time I take this thing apart and bring it back, I don't touch the jacks, but it never lines up again. So this time I had to jack it up about 1/8 of an inch on the front to get the bolt holes to line up. Now I've pulled it forward and it's stopped. My bolt holes aren't lined up by about 1/8 of an inch. I jack it up and the transmission goes, whoom. That's over exaggerated, but you can see it physically jump in there. And, you know, so, I mean, the back end's the same height that it was the last attempt. The front end ended up being lower. All I've done is rolled it back and forth. Who knows why? It would be a different height now. Jacked the front end up a little bit, and this time it just slid right in. So we might put it back together today. What are you doing? Make sure everybody wants to know you're alive, that I didn't kill you last night. Well,